Welcome to the Savvy Dentist podcast with Dr. Jesse Green, the show where great dentistry meets great business. Listen in each week as we bring you an inspiring person who will share their story, ideas and business techniques to help you create a practice and a life you love. And now introducing your host, Dr. Jesse Green.
Hello everyone, it's Jesse Green here. Welcome back to SavvyDentist.com and to the Savvy Dentist podcast. It's great to have you here as always. And today, my guest is a friend of mine, Geoff Currie. I've known Geoff for quite a number of years, and today we're going to be exploring things that he's uncovered in his 30 or 40 years of business. Geoff's been in business for that period of time. I think he started when he was in nappies, but he's been around business pretty much his whole life, and there's nothing that he hasn't done in business. He's started businesses, he's bought businesses, he's run businesses, he's sold businesses, and he's learned some lessons, from practical application. And what I really like about Geoff is he's really across the latest business thinking, but he's able to take that thinking and turn it into practical strategies that actually put money in the bank, things that make a difference on a day-to-day basis. And that is what we're going to be really talking about today. He is the author of a fabulous book called How Valuable Is Your Business, which includes tips and tactics and strategies for adding value into your business. But mostly what we're going to talk about today is systems and team, because we understand that these are the two leverage points. We also understand that they're 2 points of frustration for many business owners. And Geoff's got some great experience here that he's going to share in this conversation to make this practical, to make this applicable so that you can get some leverage into your business, to free up some time, to make some more money, and ultimately have a business and a life that you love. If you want to find out more about what Geoff does and read some of the resources on his website, I'd really encourage you to head across to businessgrowthleaders.com or to email him at jeff@jeffcurrie.com. So let's get into our conversation with Geoff. I hope you enjoy this as much as I enjoyed recording it. So as always, have a pen and paper handy because there's tons and tons of gold in this interview. You're going to love it. Here's Geoff. Geoff Currie, thank you so much for taking the time to come and hang with us on the Savvy Dentist podcast. How are you, my friend?
I am doing so well today, Jesse. It is sunshine, and down in Victoria, we'll actually be allowed out of the house and be able to do things very, very soon.
Well, good on you, mate, because I reckon all these restrictions, I don't know about you, but I've been getting a little bit of cabin fever. I'm looking forward to getting out and going to a restaurant and a cafe and doing all that sort of stuff.
Absolutely. Just out the window behind my computer here is my motorbike, and I'm looking at that very longingly. I don't care how cold it is. As soon as I can, I'm going for a ride.
Yeah. Well, mate, you got to be keen in this weather, so that's all cool. Now, mate, you've been around business coaching for a long time. You run Business Growth Leaders, which is a really well-known, well-established, and incredibly well-regarded company. I know that you've got a background in tech, and I'm curious to understand how you found your way into the line of work that you do, because it's not a straight line path, as it's same for most of us. So can you give us a bit of background there and who you work with and what sort of problems you normally come across?
Absolutely. Well, people usually find it harder to believe, but I've been running my own businesses for around 40 years. So that means I started relatively young, even though I'm getting quite grey now. The first business I had, I was buying, it was during the transition from when a lot of people were getting rid of their Valve TV sets and bringing in all the solid state stuff. So I was buying televisions as a kid for like 50 cents, fixing them and selling for 10 or 20 bucks, which in those days was a lot for me, considering I had a part-time job paying $1 an hour.
Oh, wow.
So I quickly figured that I needed to amplify. I couldn't be doing time for money stuff. If you want to look as a reflection, at the time, it was just easy hustle money for me.
Yep.
So I had many businesses going along to put myself through school. University, the same thing. I managed to start an IT company that while I was running as a uni student, just over 20, I was running around about, at the time, about 17 team and probably doing about 4 mil turnover as a uni student. So studies got a little bit distracted from my engineering degree, but one thing I did get from engineering was understanding systems and process, if that makes sense. Drawing boxes and flowcharts and breaking down complex problems into simpler, manageable ones was probably one of the lessons that I got. I was lucky enough to sell a business and be given the option to retire at 35, which I thought, yes, that is the goal. But that is so wrong. Going from, at its extremes, working 24 hours a day to sitting on your bum playing with my eldest, then Jet, who'd just been born, going from 24 hours a day to sitting on your bum 24 hours a day isn't life balance. It's somewhere in the middle. So let's call this a hiatus. While I was on the hiatus, I was ringing my mates up going, let's play golf. I always wanted to do more golf. I've always wanted to, go fishing, do more of that. So I've ended up going to my mate's place because I go, we got to work, come in for a coffee. So I'm going to my mate's places and I'm at their place of work and having a coffee and going, why do you do it like that? And then before I knew it, I kept on getting asked back to help them fix the issues in their business so they could have a bit more freedom like me. And so from that, I've been coaching for around 20 years. I haven't actually done the calculations, but I think it's well into the 50 different industries now over the past 20 years. And most of my specialty seems to be around the time, team, and money challenges of business owners and using those resources and getting the workflows happening to attract, convert, and deliver, do the marketing, sales, being able to leverage it and systematize it as one of the outcomes for the business. So whether they choose to sell it or whether they choose to run it under management so it can work mostly without them, that's what I do.
Nice. Okay. Well, I think there's a lot in there. There's a lot of threads I'd like to grab hold of and have a bit of a dangle with, because I think there's a lot of really interesting things there that people listening to this podcast will resonate with. Time, team, and money are challenges that dental practice owners face all the time. And in particular, systems as well. We all understand the value of systems as a leverage point. We all understand that, we should have them. One of the common frustrations that I hear all the time is that I've got this great practice manual or I've got this great, set of systems, but, they're just not getting used, or they're in a beautiful binder sitting on a shelf somewhere, looking immaculate, but they're just not seeing the light of day. Is that something you encounter, quite regularly as well? Do you see that problem?
Absolutely. I remember running a workshop to about 70 different business owners, and the topic of the workshop was systems. And there was this almost mutiny. They're ready to have me walk the plank and go, well, I keep on creating these systems, but they don't bloody well follow them. And there was a bit of an uproar and everyone, like they were going to lynch me like some mob. And by the end of the day, I turned them around, understood that systems and people aren't mutually exclusive things you work on. They're together. So, systems are really a collection or a framework for people to follow. You could go back to the 1800s with Taylorism, where pretty much, I can't remember the exact quote, but he says, you can keep the rest of the person. I just want their hands to be able to do the work.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, anyone who's ever employed understands that people are this messy goo of emotions and beliefs and their own life. And you can't simply point them at a task and have them work robot-like. So how do you get the outcome that you want? Is that sort of on the track of what you're after, Jesse?
Yeah, it is. Because I think one of the things that happens in a service-based business, and dentistry is obviously one of those, is, we definitely want people to be able to follow a process, to complete a process, but we also need them to bring their emotional intuition, their intelligence, especially in dentistry where you've got lots of people who are worried, afraid, and so on. So I guess let me just start by asking this question, because this is a question that a lot of people ask all the time. And I'll come to a second part of the question in a moment, but let's just go back to the task stuff for a moment. Is how do I get my people, my team, to follow the process as it has been documented?
Well, I jotted down some thoughts on this earlier today, and I come up with 3 pages. And I thought, wow, there's enough blog articles for the next 6 months for my social posting. Look, at the end of the day, I'm going to start with a couple and then come back to it, and we'll dig into a few of them as we go. So is it okay if we riff on some of those?
Go for it.
Okay. This one is going to be super controversial. They don't suck at following systems. You suck at leadership.
Oh, okay. Tell me more. I love a little bit of controversy.
Well, when you look at it, okay, we can break the components of leadership down into a couple of components, but that'll be the running theme through most of these. So most business owners have documented the neck down stuff. But how many of them are encouraging the neck up stuff? I see them documenting everything neck down and then going, but my team don't think for themselves to solve problems. Now, you can write a system, but it's going to break. Like all systems break. How do you train them to be able to systematize 80%, humanize that other 20%? So if we dig down to leadership, probably if we double back, I'll come back and close out with leadership if that's okay.
Of course.
But one of the biggest problems that I find with business owners and systems is they don't have one.
Okay.
So like I talk to business owners quite a lot, and they go, they should know their job. They've been doing it for X number of years. Well, you've just said you're unhappy with the way they were doing it.
Yeah.
So maybe we should start there. So But when you do look at the systems, I find that most are fluffy, like they're not directly actionable. It'll be like a generic fluffy, like, you're responsible for banking. Well, they don't know what your particular banking procedures are in the back office.
Yes.
So how are they going to get it right?
Yeah.
And that flows into the other one that I think you would see a lot with your crew is there's no performance standards.
Yes. Oh, mate, we see that all the time.
So they are probably following the system as they understand it, but they don't know to what end or what level. So you can go through and color the dots, join the dots, but you don't know for what end or to what standard. Are we just doing with a crayon? Are we doing some fine art? And I think that's one thing that is missing is they haven't conveyed the whole entity of who will do what by when.
So it sounds like clarity is going to be a really big piece of this, Geoff. I mean, I don't know about you, and I'm sure this person exists somewhere on the planet, but I haven't met anyone in my working life who goes to work wanting to do a bad job, right? Most people go to work wanting to do a good job, believing they do a good job, and the frustration arises when the job that they're doing doesn't meet the standards or expectations of the owner. So from what I'm hearing you say, it sounds like there's a breakdown in communication somewhere in there.
Absolutely. I agree completely. Most people want to do a good job. But here's the thing that I see in so many business owners. The business owner and the employee only look at the job description twice.
Yeah.
Once when you hire them.
Once when you fire
them.
Yeah.
And there's kind of a gap in there that I think we can improve an awful lot on as business owners. And to be honest, the systems that most people have got documented are probably outdated. And you think of the pace of change, even the processes that would have changed in the last 8 weeks since COVID's around any business would have dramatically affected everything. You can have your guidelines, but, things are going to break with such rapid change. So I think most business owners only actually update their job description when they're hiring for the next person they just fired because they weren't reviewing it.
Yeah, totally. I agree.
So great. So they only look at it twice and they only update it once over a longer period. I think, straight away, if you want to fix things, start there. More consistent updates. The other thing is I see business owners do the leave alone zap method of feedback, which is the person will think they're doing the right thing. And then the owner gets more and more to the point where he just has a bad day and blah, it all comes out. Leave alone, zap. They cop it and they go, oh, I wasn't prepared for that.
Yep.
And then you leave them alone for a long period of time. There's no regularity of driving and continuing the system. So, and that's the other thing that I see missing in most systems is you aren't Moses. And you can't come down from the mountain and hand out these tablets and expect them to follow it. Like Moses did it, and he hasn't got 100% follow success rate in those 10 commandments either. So I think it's an awful lot of work for owners when they themselves choose to take on creating the systems and hand it across and expect it to be followed. The only way you're going to get ownership is if they have a hand in creating the systems as well and updating them and monitoring them. Mm-hmm. And I'm not talking about just once a year at their performance appraisal.
So, okay, what would that look like then? Tell me a bit more, on a practical level, how do you get people to create the systems? How do you get them involved in that process? How often do you review them? What does that look like in practice? In the businesses that you've worked with, that you've helped get the business owner to be out of the business somewhat, what does that look like?
Well, for most businesses, I actually say you should be mentoring your team once a month. So around every 4 weeks, you should be having a scheduled 20 minutes with your team member where you are extracting from them how things are going with that role, what's going right, what's going wrong, and actually working out a game plan for the next 4 weeks.
Yep.
So one of the first mentoring sessions I teach my clients to do is to sit down with them and say, all right, bring along to this session for 20 minutes, everything, all the systems you've got, I'll bring along all the systems I think we've got, and we'll see what's real and what isn't.
Yep.
And I think there's a quote I read the other day and I meant to write it down. It basically says a teacher will shine the light on where someone needs to look, but they won't tell them what to see. And I think mentoring is very much about going, you will do this, you will do that. It's not about that. It's about actually extracting from them, going, so what would work here? How does that impact other people? If you were to go and number yourself, and I usually, once you've got a framework of a system, I go, right, now go down the list and just with a pen or a pencil, just say, scale out of 10, how well are you doing that? How well are you doing that? How well are you doing that? And you will find people start to measure themselves fairly harshly, say, well, you're doing really good at that. What 3 things would you like to improve on over the next month? And quite often, once you've got an actionable plan, you're not pitting yourself against them to see if you can get a better system. You're both sitting on the same side of the table, looking at the agreed model on how that role should look and what the battle plan is to lift the scores up to be followed more consistently through the next period.
Nice, love that. So here's a question for you, mate, because if you read any of the books around like E-Myth or anything like that, Michael Gerber talks a lot about systems and process, and McDonald's is the poster child for a systemized business and so on. Do you think it's possible to over-systemize your business? Is there such a thing as over-systemizing?
Yes. Have you ever read legal documents? Sometimes I think they hide all the clauses in the volume so that the real stuff is missed. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's actually keeping it simple, because I would rather see a system that's probably 80% of the business owner's expected standard that's followed 100% than waiting for the owner to have the 100% system that's followed never.
Yeah, totally. It's funny, isn't it? Because I've noticed that too. And even in my own business, because I'm a pretty detailed kind of guy, which I love a good process as much as the next person, or a good Excel spreadsheet, which means I don't have that many mates. But it is possible, I believe, to over-systemize, and you kind of rob your organization of flexibility, you rob your organization of the ability to innovate, and you rob your organization of the ability to bring their own heart and mind and soul to the job as well. So I think there is some risks around that, which you've articulated really nicely. So Geoff, we know that systems are important. We know that having an 80% system is good enough to get 80% of the outcome is great. We know that there's having enough systems without over-systemization. You spoke about time, team, and money, and I do want to talk about team and systems together, because I think there is something to be said there. And we've kind of touched on it already about having that mentoring structure and having clarity and having all those other things in place. Where else do you think, the systems and team, that intersection, where else do you see businesses getting it a bit wrong where those two areas overlap?
Look, I think actually, I'm going to go back to talking about the Taylorism thing. So my interpretation or understanding of the dental industry is you have got as a dentist, you've got regimented processes, and you're moving things, fractions of a millimeter per week, and everything is systematized. Now, how well as a dentist, if you had to rock up and just do the exact same process to the similar sort of patient every day, every week, how would they feel?
As a dentist, how'd they feel? I'd probably, after about 2 or 3 days, be bored out of their brain. And of course, that's what some dentists experience quite routinely.
Absolutely. So my ask is, what if that's the case for the business owner, the dentist as a principal in your case? How can you expect the team to be the same? So how do you introduce some ownership and variety into that? Can you swap roles around? Can you continually be teaching? So let's say you're evaluating them and you've got, your 8, 9s and 10s for the self-evaluation within a reasonable amount of margin. You agree. What else are you challenging them with to keep extending the role, to learn more, to be better? What other projects are you getting them engaged in? Yeah,
I love that. Okay, cool. Can I change gear for 2 seconds? Because there's something I'd like to just focus in on, because you've given me lots of segues and entry points into this conversation. I'm very grateful for that, and I don't want to, let a good opportunity go to waste. Is it okay if I just change gear for 2 seconds?
Absolutely.
Cool. You mentioned in the intro, when you had your business while you're at university, that you're able to effectively scale that up. You got it up to 4 or 5 mil, able to sell it and create some freedom in your life. Now, what I want to ask you is about creating freedom within your life while retaining ownership of the business. And of course, we're looking at this through the lens of systems, looking at this through the lens of team. But time is something that most dental practice owners feel they have precious little of. They're often doing dentistry by day to generate revenue. They're running the business around that. So they're managing team. They're trying to do their systems, all this sort of stuff. They're trying to fit in and around their clinical workload, and there becomes this tension, right? There becomes this case of, if I take time away to work on the business or build out these assets, as we call them, the scalable infrastructure, it means I'm not generating revenue. And what I normally talk about is you've got to change gear. When you change gear, you take your foot off the accelerator, you engage the clutch, you change the gear, and then you reaccelerate. But I'm wondering what your experience was in your business, as well as the experience you've seen others that you've worked with in the way that they've been able to create time, because there seems to be this constant tension of doing the work and building the business.
Absolutely. I think the day you decide to own your own business, you stop being a butcher, a baker, candlestick maker, or a dentist, and you actually need to start being a business owner.
Yeah.
So most people think, oh my God, that is such a big job. I don't know what to do. So they stick to what they do know, and that will be their technician skill, if you want to refer to eMyth. And the challenge that they get across to then is they don't know what they're supposed to do when they're being a business owner. And really, for the most part, they think, oh, it's going to take away all my time. It is about 1 to 2 hours a day. Now, if you do those 1 to 2 hours a day, you will generate more productivity by focusing on teaching your team to be more productive than you just working harder.
Yeah.
It is the classic e-myth. Businesses will grow to about 5 team in the book. And I've seen it across different industries. It gets about five team. And that's as hard as a single business owner can work carrying all those other team.
Yeah.
Unless you learn to flip, you are always going to be stuck in the seesaw of trying to do the work yourself and actually lead the team. And I think the efficiency comes from just drawing a line in the sand. If you can only get 15 minutes a day, start with 15 minutes a day. But your job is to not be doing their job.
Yeah. Okay. So people are going to be listening to this and go, oh, fantastic. This is exactly what I want to do, Geoff. I want to create some time in my life. I know that I've got to get more out of my team. I know I don't want to be doing their work. I know I've got to work on the business as much as anything else. What are the business owner activities? We've spoken about creating team and being a trainee organisation is another expression that we use. What else should business owners really be thinking about as they go through this process, as they think, okay, I want to transition from the technician to the business owner?
I think the role comes down to people. So the classic model, if you to draw the circle that I was taught many years ago, was that the business owner runs the business that serves clients. That is the team, and then the team serve them. It is completely the wrong direction. So, first of all, you got to change the direction. Your job is to serve your team, because if you don't have them running at their capacity, you're A, burning resources, and B, not building a business that's scalable at any level. It's the team's job to then serve the customers who then serve the business, and the business should serve you as a commercial profitable enterprise that works mostly without you.
Okay, so let's think about this for a second then, because the tension then becomes of how do I flip that switch? How do I get enough? How do I get enough this? So there'll be people who are going, I understand it, I get it, I just don't know how to make that transition. And I know you said start with 15 minutes, then try and get to half an hour, then to an hour, then to 2 hours a day. Really, for some of them, they're going to be saying, I get it, I understand it, intellectually it makes perfect sense, I get it. Do you find that there's some challenge in actually moving from an intellectual understanding to an embracement or an embodiment or getting it done kind of?
Yeah, look, change is one of those things. It's hard at first, messy in the middle, and beautiful at the end. Everyone just wants to get the beautiful and easy at the end. So look, I had a bit of a dare from a client late last year, and he said, if you're so good, cut my working hours. I go, great. I'm not going to do it for you. I'm going to do it for a bunch of people. So I ran, what in our industry is called a pilot program. And I put half a dozen people through a 4-week program where I showed them how to cut their working hours as business owners by 20 to 50%. I failed. Instead of being a 30-day program, it should have been a 2-week program.
Oh, nice.
Because most business owners lose their day doing other people's jobs.
Yeah.
So what's the first thing I do? Make sure they give it back to them. So quickly is just like, if you want to do the back of the envelope, you can, but there's a better system than that. But back of the envelope, if you document all the things you've got to do today, and then start writing people's initials beside it, whose their job it actually is, you will find you'll probably cut your hours by half straight up.
Nice.
So it's a matter of you then being able to delegate that across. So 5 minutes to do the list. The rest of the 15 minutes, if that's all you've got, is handing as many of those back to who's supposed to be doing it.
And resourcing them to be able to do it appropriately, right?
Absolutely. And that's where the mentoring comes in as a first level.
Yeah. Got it. Okay. So, ladies and gents, here's a bit of an action plan for you. Maybe we should run a bit of a 2-week challenge here, mate, and we should see how many people, or let's be real, let's keep the bar at the same level and make it a 4-week challenge. So, ladies and gents, if you're listening to this podcast right now, here's my challenge to you. Let's cut down your on-the-business activities by 50%. yeah, you might still be doing a little bit of clinical work, but all that other stuff that goes around it, let's cut that in half over the next 4 weeks. And Geoff, the process is write down everything that you're going to do today, tomorrow, and the next day. Assign some initials to the person that really should be doing that.
Doing it, absolutely. And then prioritize what you're supposed to be doing. So you'll have in your industry, most of the owners will have clinical appointments. Is that how you call it?
Yep.
So they'll be doing those. But sometimes you actually got to take a bit of a look and go, well, I could probably put the hygienist onto that one. I could probably break that service down. So you could cut some hours out there. And the reason why I say that is most business owners try and hold on to those tasks themselves, thinking they're the only ones that can do it. So they would rather do, let's say you've got a service that might be worth $500. The reality is in your industry nowadays, it's more competitive. There might be $100 in it. So you will do that yourself and let maybe $300 worth of labor wander around in circles, wondering what they should be doing.
Yeah, totally. So, okay. So here's the challenge, guys. 4 weeks.
Okay.
Jot down everything that you're doing today, tomorrow, and the next day, whatever it is, right? Pick it.
Yep.
Yeah. So get a list of the stuff that you do that perhaps you're not to do, whether it's clinical, whether it's admin, whatever it happens to be. Put some initials next to the things that you really are not the best person that should be doing it. And then let's start building out some resources to hand those tasks back to who they ultimately belong to anyway. And so here's my challenge for the listener. If you can cut down your admin in things like that by, good 30, 40%, whatever it is, free up. Let's just say you want to free up 3 hours a week, 3 hours a week or half a day a week. That's half a day to do something that you want to do with your family, with your loved ones, whatever it is. Now, if you can do that, I would love it if you could email us so that we can tell Geoff that he's been able to help someone achieve that. And if you manage to do that, I'll come up with a gift or some sort of prize, something that's worthwhile and good. And that will be our little way of celebrating you. To send a nice email to Geoff and we'll give you some cool gift to make it worth your while, because I think it'll be a really cool challenge. Because ultimately, here's the thing, Geoff, this is what I've learned as well, is there comes a point where you get enough money, but it becomes about time after that.
Absolutely. I love the idea of the challenge you've challenged for the listeners. I think if they take it seriously, they will see results. But even if they failed and they got 10% saving in their time, do you think that is a success?
It's absolutely a success.
It's like someone trying to give up smoking. It might take a couple of times, but you get better each time and eventually it's done.
Yeah.
And I think the idea is just be consistent and persistent. I think that's the other thing missing about our leadership styles as business owners with that leave alone zap. But I would actually say, can you hold off? Can you delay gratification of spending time with the loved one? So let's say you save half day a week. What would happen if you took for the next 2 months that half day a week and mentored your team to get the rest of the systems sorted? For every position, write down the half dozen things that are bugging you about that position. So when you have a chat to them, you open a dialogue and ask them questions. You can't sort of, point the finger at them, and actually encourage the training and the redevelopment of those systems over the next 2 months after that saving. And that way you will not just be winning the game, you'll be winning the season.
All right. Okay. So that's the challenge 2.0. All right. We've just leveled up the challenge, guys. Love it. I love it. That's fantastic. So you heard it here first, guys. So let's get you some time. Let's get you into a real business. Let's get you out of the technician role and into the business owner role, because that's the role ultimately that's going to give you time, money, and create wealth for you as compared to just, earning income. So, Geoff, let's go back to what we were talking about a bit earlier. You mentioned to me that leadership was where you want to circle back to, and we will come back to that in a moment. Yeah. But where do you think the rookie mistakes are? Where do you think that, if you could tap someone on the shoulder and say, hey, there's a better way. What are the things, that you'd kind of point people in the direction of?
I would say that systems are not a proxy for leadership as a container.
Ooh, okay. Nice.
So I understand there's a lot of owners that end up in that position because of that's their goal, but they don't necessarily like dealing with people and all the fuzzy stuff that comes with managing a team. So they try to systematize so they don't have to deal with the team. And I think that is no substitute for leading them. Right now, your team, when they get back on deck, given the current situation, are going to be floundering. They go, am I going to be forced back on a job keeper, job seeker? Can this thing be maintainable? Can we run the operation? Like, they want their certainty. So even right now, they want certainty in their role. They want certainty that they're adding value. that is why they're employees and not business owners. So if you help them deliver that, you'll start to be the leader so that they are working harder than you do. And I think just expecting a system to be it, like there are systems for speeding, rules for speeding. Yet if there was no one policing it or encouraging it with road safety and all these other things, I'd probably speed a little bit more than I do right now.
Yeah.
So I think just having the system in isolation doesn't work. Neither would the road rules without having someone policing them. But you don't have to police with a baton. It is about encouraging people. So most business owners will pass down information like a magistrate would pass down a sentence. You have done this wrong. I think a better form of leadership is when they bubble the lesson up for themselves and they understand the ramifications.
Yeah.
So many team members go, I just found a new way of doing it by half. So I'll just keep doing this. I'll save myself half the time. But they don't realize down the line how much extra that's cost someone else to actually bring it back into balance. Like a good example would be a technician who doesn't complete their paperwork properly and spends that extra 30 seconds, and then the back office has to spend 15 minutes running around chasing up the missing information.
Yeah, totally. Okay.
But if I was to tap someone on the shoulder and say, this is the thing that you need to stop right now, to business owners, I would say, stop cutting the system yourself.
Ooh.
I feel the pain every time I have to hand that one out because we have an expertise to go, I'll just do this quickly. So much like kids, employees learn by what you do, not what you say.
Yeah, nice. Okay. So be the example.
Be the example.
All right. Okay. So that ties into leadership very, very nicely, which is obviously going to be a huge part of, how the business goes. I have a view, Geoff, and you may agree, you may disagree, but my view is that the growth of the business is constrained primarily by the growth of the leader.
Absolutely.
And that's the rate limiting factor.
Yeah,
right?
the law of the lid. I remember many years ago when I first started coaching, I was doing a speaking gig.
Yeah.
And I just held my hand flat and I showed my other hand coming up and hitting the top. And I go, your business will never outgrow you. And someone come up and says, as soon as I saw you do that, I knew we needed to solve that problem.
Yeah.
I think most owners are aware of it. So I have an example I quite often talk about. Now, it's not in the dental industry, but it's in the fish and chip shop industry. Many years ago, I coached a Greek client who had a fish and chip shop down here in Victoria. I wasn't coaching him during that stage, but it was one of his earlier businesses. Anyway, that business was doing $1.2 million a year, many, many years ago. So it was quite a lot.
Yep.
As a fish and chip shop. So most fish and chip shops would still like to be able to do that number even in today's terms. He sold that to a guy who'd ever only run $600,000 fish and chip shops before.
Yeah. Here we know.
Within 12 months, what was that fish and chip shop turning over?
$600,000.
Exactly. Why? Because he went in and did exactly the same thing as he did when he was running a $600,000 fish and chip shop, and he got the $600,000 result.
Yeah, exactly. So this is the big lesson, right? So ladies and gents, I really hope you listen up to this because I think Geoff and I are very much singing from the same hymn sheet on this one. But if you want to grow a multi-million-dollar dental practice, you need to develop the skill set to be able to run a multi-million-dollar dental practice. If you want to run a one-chair $500,000 practice, and you take that skill set into a multi-million-dollar business, your business will shrink and contract to what you can do. And so you've got to grow, you've got to develop, and that learning is on you as the owner, right?
So what I hear you saying, Jesse, is if you keep fighting for chair hours at the expense of running your business, you are always going to be a small practice fighting for chair hours.
Yeah, absolutely. Guaranteed, 100%. So, wow, there's a couple of real pearls of wisdom, ladies and gents. Just go back and listen to that, last minute or two from Geoff a few times over, because I hope you really understand the importance of what he's said there. So again, just please go back and listen to that last minute or two of Geoff's, because there's some absolute pearls of wisdom. So Geoff, let's talk about leadership then, and how practice owners can develop into better leaders and they can develop these better business skills. Where's a good point to start?
Okay. I believe most people overcomplicate leadership like an MBA skill.
Yeah.
Like, it is not volumes and volumes of leaderships, but it's demonstrating. So one of the big ones that gets me is people go, well, I got to do the chair hours. I've got to be able to do the paperwork and stay behind. I got to work hard because I have to be the example for them. No, Your example is to do your job, not their job, so that they understand their example is to do their job, not float around the office, sticking their nose into other people's job.
Yeah.
So I think leadership is a very practical demonstration of what you want to do, but I'm not talking about the technical skills. It's about being where you're supposed to be.
Yeah.
So if nothing else, most people realized as business owners that their example they're supposed to be setting is doing their role. That is stepping into the leadership because that's their position on the organizational chart that they have. That's what they should be doing.
Yeah, nice.
Now, from a practical point of view, your job is to support them with whatever resources they need. So if it's systems, if they can't do the job because they don't know how, or you need to accelerate training, having a system, even though you might have a guru in your team that would train every new person, by that person having a system will bring their training down from, 6 months to 6 weeks to get them to a point of acceptable standard. Now, I think you probably have a system of maybe 12 weeks because nearly all of us as business owners tend to take this mythical 3-month probationary period. So we've got to get them up to par or get rid of them by 3 months. I think we can accelerate that by having good systems. And that also enables that person to come out. I see systems as scaffolding for bringing their true nature out. Systems will never make your worst employee a good employee. I don't care how much the best football coach spends with me learning to kick a football. I'm going to be a crap footballer.
Yeah. Sadly, that's my story with cricket too. Much as I love cricket, my cricket career is cut short due to an acute lack of talent, which is very sad but very true. And I love that point, mate, because systems don't compensate for people's lack of skill. And, systems can provide a baseline potentially. But what I'm hearing you say then is we've got to make sure that we're bringing good people into the mix who not only share our culture, our vision, values, and so on, but they've also got enough about them from a performance and skill set perspective that we can then make them better.
I don't know whether you've noticed, Jesse, but all employees are not equal when it comes to performing or fitting into your organization.
I don't know.
And that's okay because there is somewhere else that they're probably going to fit in quite well and excel at.
Yeah.
However, one of the first jobs as a leader is to make sure you're starting off by setting yourself up the best chance for success. No football recruiter will go and recruit the worst players they can find. They're taking diamonds in the rough and sharpening them with systems, skills, drills, and mentoring to get that polish on. And I think as leaders, we do exactly the same thing.
Yeah. And the other thing that's really interesting, to use your sporting metaphor as well, and to reiterate a point that you made earlier, is, if you are a footballer and you are an elite footballer, you're training 5 days a week and you're competing on a Saturday, for instance, right? Whereas in business, we're often competing 5 days a week and training 1 day a week, and we wonder why that we're not getting the results that we want to get. So again, it comes back to providing the time, the energy, the resources for adequate training, for adequate skills development to be able to, polish these diamonds in the rough so they do become, the gems that we know that they can be. You've got to give them the opportunity, right?
Absolutely. Like when I teach clients to do mentoring, it is day one. Like it's not, okay, we've employed someone new at the counter. So, all right, I'll introduce myself as the owner and then, someone else can deal with it and then forget about it until someone comes in and says they need to go, they're not performing. I think the gap in the middle, again, could be improved. And I would normally say to most business owners is make sure you can spend at least 5 minutes with them every day for the first couple of weeks.
Yeah, nice.
And just have that position description. So what did you tick off today? Like you can create a bit of a scorecard if you like, but what did you tick off today? What are your challenges? What are you really proud of? I normally have a 3-question framework that works for most mentoring situations. And that is, so what would you like to acknowledge yourself for? So that's a question where they can actually feel good, or they have to feel good about what they're doing. Second thing is, well, out of all these things, what would you like to improve? What would you like to work on next? And the third thing is, what resources or help do you need to do it?
Great.
So out of those 3 questions, sometimes you might need to train them, but you might say, oh, Mary over in accounts will be able to teach you how to do that.
Yeah.
Let's catch up in a couple of weeks and see how, we'll pull the system up. So you can actually pass mentoring off, but your job is to, as a leader, is to control and make sure they have all the resources they need to progress to the next level.
Yeah. Loving that, mate. That's awesome.
So then that will drop out from, after the first couple of weeks, it would go out to, every month and go into original cycle. So the first one is very descriptive in that you're just teaching them the role. The next one is you're dropping out to monthly where you're actually trying to bring that flavor of them so they improve the role and the system. So you can only have, sticking with the team thing, you can only have a premiership team if you've got premiership players. So really the mentoring sessions aren't talking about, Mr. and Mrs. Smith's appointment and how that went. We're actually talking about how this role and how the player in it can be better. And I think lastly, one of the big mistakes that I see when it comes to leadership. So that's very much mentoring in the middle. And I think one of the things I see is everyone has maybe peers working with them. You would actually regard them as competent and successful in their own right. So you go, well, I don't need to mentor them. I only need to work with the trouble kids that always give me the headaches. I think that is so wrong because you get so much disengagement because you feel dejected because, that experienced person is not getting any time. And I still think you should be doing mentoring on your best people and not ignoring them because your best people need support and acknowledgement just like everyone else.
Yeah, that's excellent. All right, mate, there's some absolute pearls of wisdom, ladies and gents. I hope you've had your pen and paper out. You've been scribbling some notes furiously because there's some absolute pearls of wisdom there from Geoff. Mate, you've been really generous with your time today. And firstly, I want to say thank you because what you've shared is really practical. What you've shared is really important because the thing that people get stuck with is not just systems, but they get stuck with team. And of course, systems and team produce money and time and freedom. And, what you've shared, I think are really useful steps, as I said, to be able to get the job done and to implement, today. Mate, as we wrap up, are there any last things that you think the audience should really know as they go about their quest to transition from the technician or the self-employed person through to a business owner? Is there anything else that you think we need to give them so they can make that leap?
It's not a leap from one to the other. It's by degrees.
Yeah.
Even from the mentoring point of view, I would say just get together for a conversation. If you get one thing, not 10 out of it, it is a success. The fact that you spent time with them and actually worked on the systems together, that would be it. I think far too many business owners go, well, it needs to be done right, so I'll take this away with me. Your job is to leave the work with them. So when you walk out of that session, they've got homework to do and you're off to the next one. So you can get around your team quickly. They're all working for you. And if you've got 10 team, by just doing the mentoring and working on your systems, you'll be moving forward 10 times faster.
Lovely. Thanks, mate. That's awesome. So, ladies and gents, if you want to find Geoff, head across to businessgrowthleaders.com. And certainly go and check out his stuff because I've been through Geoff's website, with a fine-tooth comb. There's some tremendous resources there. And I'd really encourage you to go and read what's on there, download the bits and pieces that are on the website. I know he's got a couple of guides there that are really useful and really practical. And there's one that I particularly loved, which was the 7 steps to creating time in your business, which I think is a really good resource that I know Geoff's got on his website that I'm going to encourage every business owner to go and download because it's again, really practical and useful. So, Geoff, mate, you've been an absolute trooper. And thanks once again for coming onto our show and sharing your wisdom, your knowledge, and your experience in the real world. Because this is not academic, this is real world stuff. And you've done it, which I love. And you've been able to help other people replicate those results. So again, I just love the practical nature of what you talk about. So thank you, mate.
Keep it simple, get it done.
All right. I love that, mate. You're a good man. All right, ladies and gents, have a great week ahead. And Geoff, once again, mate, you're a scholar and a gentleman. And let's do this again because this has been fun.
That's good. It's a pleasure. Although I think I must ask that we can adjust this to suit our natures. I think this should be made later in the day. And we should rename it from a podcast to a pubcast so we can have a beer.
Oh, I love it. A pubcast. There we go. The Savvy Dentist Pubcast. All right, you're on, mate. I'm going to take you up on that.
Done.
Cheers, mate.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the Savvy Dentist podcast with Dr. Jesse Green. For more free tools and resources, join the free Facebook group. Visit drjessegreen.com/Facebook. And for more episodes, visit drjessegreen.com/savvydentist.